Hi, welcome. Chapter 3, Part 2, The Delhi Sultans. In the first part of this chapter, we learned about early Turkish rulers, Khalji dynasty and Tughlaq dynasty. We found that they maintained garrison towns or fortified cities. We learned about campaigns of expansion through internal frontier and external frontier, which helped the Delhi Sultans to expand their rule to vast regions of the subcontinent. If you haven't watched the first part, please find the link in the description box and watch it first. A closer look. Administration and consolidation under the Khaljis and Tughlaq. A closer look. Administration and consolidation under the Khaljis and Tughlaqs. The consolidation or merging of a kingdom as vast as Delhi Sultanate needed reliable governors and administrators. Rather than appointing aristocrats and chieftains as governors, the early Delhi Sultans, especially Iltutmish, favored their special slaves purchased for military service called bandagan in Persian. They were carefully trained to be in charge of some of the most important political offices in the kingdom. You see, since they were brought as slaves and were totally dependent upon their master, the Sultan could trust and rely upon them. The sultans were advised: a slave whom one has brought up and promoted must be looked after, for it needs a whole lifetime and good luck to find a worthy and experienced slave. Wise men have said that a worthy and experienced slave is better than a son. The Khaljis and Tughlaqs continued to use bandagan and also raised people of humble birth or the nobility who were often their clients to high political positions. A client is someone who is under the protection of another. They were appointed as generals and governors. However, this also caused political instability. Slaves and clients were loyal to their masters and patrons, but not to their heirs or successors. New sultans had their own servants. As a result, when a new king ascended, often there was a conflict between the new and the old nobility. The support and power Delhi sultans gave to these people shocked people of high class in the society. The authors of Persian Tawarikh criticized the Delhi sultans for appointing the low and base-born to high offices. Let's have a better understanding when we say appointing the low and base-born to high offices. Let's have a look at the officials of Sultan Muhammad Tughlaq. Sultan Muhammad Tughlaq appointed Aziz Kumar, a wine distiller, Firuz Hajam, a barber, Manga Tabak, a cook, and two gardeners, Lada and Pira, to high administrative posts. Ziauddin Barani, a mid-14th century chronicler, reported their appointments as a sign of the Sultan's loss of political judgment and his incapacity to rule. So coming to the administration, how did these sultans administer such a vast region? The land of the empire was divided into several large and small lands. Like the early sultans, the Khalji and Tughlaq rulers appointed military commanders as governors of these territories. These lands were called Iqta, and their holder or owner was called Iqtadar or Mukti. The duty of the Muktis or the owner was to lead military campaigns to protect these territories and maintain law and order in their Iktas. In exchange for their military services, the Muktis collected the revenues from Iktas as salaries. They paid their soldiers from these revenues. Their offices was not hereditary and the Muktis were frequently transferred. Such harsh conditions of service were rigorously imposed during the reign of Alauddin Khalji and Muhammad Tughlaq. Accountants were appointed by the state to check the amount of revenue collected by the Muktis. Care was taken that the Muktis collected only the taxes prescribed by the state and that he kept the required number of soldiers. As the Delhi Sultans brought the hinterlands of the cities under their control, they forced the chieftains and rich landlords to accept these sultans' authority. Under Alauddin Khalji, the state brought the assessment and collections of land revenue under its own control. The rights of the local chieftains to impose taxes were cancelled and they were also forced to pay taxes. The Sultan's administrators measured the land and kept careful accounts. Some of the old chieftains and landlords became revenue collectors and assessors. There were three types of taxes. Tax on cultivation called kharaj. It amounted to about 50% of the peasant's produce. Another tax was on cattle and tax on houses. It is important to remember that large parts of the subcontinent remained outside the control of the Delhi Sultans. It was difficult to control distant provinces like Bengal from Delhi, and Sultanate rule in most of southern India existed for only a few years. Even in the Gangetic Plain, there were forested areas that Sultanate's forces could not penetrate. Local chieftains established their rule in these regions. Sometimes rulers like Alauddin Khalji and Muhammad Tughlaq could force their control in these areas, but only for a short duration. Chieftains and their fortification. Ibn Battuta was a 14th century traveler from Morocco, Africa. He was the greatest medieval Muslim traveler and the author of one of the most famous travel books, the Rihla, the Travels. We said that the chieftains ruled the forested areas of Gangetic Plain and the Sultan's army tried to take control over these areas too. Ibn Battuta explained that chieftains sometimes fortified or secured themselves in mountains, in rocky, uneven and rugged places as well as in bamboo groves. In India, the bamboo is not hollow, it is big. Its several parts are so intertwined that even fire cannot affect them, and together they are very strong. The chieftains live in these forests which serve them as ramparts or defensive wall, inside which are their cattle and their crops. There is also water for them within, that is rainwater which collects there. Hence they cannot be subdued except by powerful armies who entering their forest cut down the bamboos with specially prepared instruments. In 1219, the Mongols under Genghis Khan invaded Transoxiana in northeast Iran and the Delhi Sultanate faced the attack soon after. Mongol attacks on the Delhi Sultanate increased during the reign of Alauddin Khalji and in the early years of Muhammad Tughlaq's rule. This forced the two rulers to organize a large standing army in Delhi. It posed a huge administrative challenge. Please note, these two rulers reigned around 10 years apart. It is interesting to see how the two sultans, Alauddin Khalji and Muhammad Tughlaq, dealt with this Mongol invasion. During the reign of Alauddin Khalji, the Delhi was attacked twice. As a defensive measure, Alauddin Khalji raised a large standing army. The Sultanate was attacked in the early years of Muhammad Tughlaq's reign. The Mongol army was defeated. Muhammad Tughlaq was confident about the strength of his army and his resources to plan an attack on Transoxiana. See, he planned an attack on Mongol territory Transoxiana. He therefore raised a large standing army to attack Transoxiana. Alauddin constructed a new garrison town named Siri for his soldiers. Rather than constructing a new garrison town, the oldest of the four cities of Delhi, or earlier known as Delhi Kona, was emptied of its residents and the soldiers were deployed there. And the residents of the old city were sent to new capital, Daulatabad in the south. The soldiers had to be fed. This was done through the produce collected as tax from the lands between the Ganga and Yamuna. Tax was fixed at 50% of the peasant's yield. What did Muhammad Tughlaq do? Produce from the same area, that is the land between Ganga and Yamuna, was collected as tax to feed the army. But to meet the expense of such a large number of soldiers, the Sultan levied additional taxes. This coincided with famine in the area. Now the soldiers had to be paid. Alauddin chose to pay soldiers' salaries in cash. The soldiers would buy their supplies from merchants in Delhi. There was a chance that merchants would raise their prices. To stop this, Alauddin controlled the prices of goods in Delhi. Prices were carefully surveyed by officers, and merchants who did not sell at the prescribed rates were punished. Muhammad Tughlaq also paid his soldiers cash salaries, but instead of controlling prices, he used a token currency, somewhat like present-day paper currency, but made out of cheap metals, not gold and silver. See, people in the 14th century did not trust these coins. They were very smart. They saved their gold and silver coins and paid all their taxes to the state with this token currency. So the Sultanate got taxed not as a produce from the peasants but as token currency. This cheap currency could also be counterfeited or faked easily. So now you see, Alauddin's administrative measures were quite successful, and chroniclers praised his reign for its cheap prices and efficient supplies of goods in the market. He successfully withstood the threat of Mongol invasions. And what happened to Muhammad Tughlaq's administrative measures? Muhammad Tughlaq's administrative measures were failure. He then gave up to his plan to invade Transoxiana and dispersed his large army. Meanwhile, his administrative measures created complications. The shifting of people to Daulatabad was rescinded. The raising of taxes and famine in the Ganga-Yamuna belt led to widespread rebellion. And finally, the token currency had to be recalled or cancelled. See, due to these failed reforms, we may call Muhammad Tughlaq as wise fool. But in this list of Muhammad Tughlaq's failures, we sometimes forget that for the first time in the history of Sultanate, a Delhi Sultan planned a campaign to capture Mongol territory. Unlike Alauddin's defensive measures, Muhammad Tughlaq's measures were conceived as a part of military offensive against the Mongols. Alauddin tried to defend the Mongol attack, whereas Muhammad Tughlaq planned to attack the Mongol army. So until now, we have been looking at the Sultanate in the 13th and 14th century under three dynasties, the Slave dynasty, the Khalji dynasty and the Tughlaq dynasty. Now, what happened to the Sultanate in the 15th and 16th centuries? Let's have a look at the rulers of the last two dynasties, Sayyid and Lodi. Khisar Khan was the founder of Sayyid dynasty. He was the governor of Firuzshah Tughlaq. Khisar Khan joined Taimur, a Mongol ruler, when he attacked Delhi and succeeded the Tughlaq dynasty. There were three other rulers before the Sayyid dynasty was defeated by Bahlul Lodi, the founder of Lodi dynasty. The Lodi dynasty. Bahlul Lodi was the founder of Lodi dynasty. He ruled between 1451 and 1489. He was followed by other two rulers, Sikandar Lodi and Ibrahim Lodi. Ibrahim Lodi was killed in the Battle of Panipat in 1526. Thus the Mughal Empire was established with Babur as the first emperor. There, the Delhi Sultanate ended and the era of Mughal Empire began. So, after the Tughlaqs, the Sayyid and Lodi dynasties ruled from Delhi and Agra until 1526. By then, Jaunpur, Bengal, Malwa, Gujarat, Rajasthan and the entire South India had independent rulers who established flourishing states and prosperous capitals. This was also the period which saw the emergence of new ruling groups like the Afghans and Rajputs. Some of the states established in this period were small but powerful and extremely well administered. For example, the Sur dynasty. Sher Shah Sur started his career as the manager of a small territory for his uncle in Bihar and eventually challenged and defeated the Mughal Emperor Humayun. Sher Shah captured Delhi and established his own dynasty, the Sur dynasty. Although the Sur dynasty ruled only for 15 years, it introduced an administration that borrowed elements from Alauddin Khalji and made them more efficient. Sher Shah's administration became the model followed by the great Emperor Akbar when he consolidated the Mughal Empire. How was the governance in other parts of the world? Let's have a look at the country, France. The three orders, the Peace of God, Knights and Crusades. The idea of the three orders was first formulated in France in the early 11th century. It divided society into three classes: those who prayed, those who fought, and those who tilled the land. This division of society into three orders was supported by the church to strengthen its dominant role in the society. This helped the emergence of a new warrior group called knights. Knights were medieval gentlemen soldiers, usually highborn. The church patronized this group and used them to propagate their idea of peace of God. The attempt was to direct warriors away from conflict amongst themselves and send them instead on a campaign against the Muslims who had captured the city of Jerusalem. This led to a series of campaigns called the Crusades. These campaigns in the service of God and Church completely altered the status of knights. Originally, these knights did not belong to the class of nobles, but by the end of 11th century in France and a century later in Germany, the humble origins of these warriors were forgotten. By the 12th century, nobles also wanted to be known as knights. See, in this chapter, we try to understand the Delhi Sultanate, the Muslim rulers who ruled the vast region of India. There were five dynasties. They built mosques with amazing architecture. The start of Muslim rule brought in great cultural diversity, which became an important and invaluable feature of our country. The Delhi Sultanate stands as an integral part of the history of India. Thanks for watching and learning. Thank you.